LLMs are language models, so they really thrive at any language specific task. So imagine any sort of task that you are performing on a daily basis, whether it's writing something, talking to someone, maybe scanning through the text, looking for information by reading, searching for stuff. There's so many things that we do on a daily basis that involve language, that large language models will be able to assist us with tremendously and sort of augment the way we are currently processed. Search systems for sure will be augmented very soon with large language models. Storytelling, the way we build a story, the way we create a character. With language model, you basically have a creative assistant that can help you brainstorm ideas for your story, for your character, for your setting, create different iterations of it. I can imagine in the future also stories that are sort of personalized to a user, where you're able to choose how your story unfolds depending on who you are as a reader of the story and what interests you the most.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the D4 Data Channel podcast. I'm your host Deepak, and with me we have Sandra Kublik. Sandra is a digital creator, author, YouTuber, and developer relations at Cohere AI. She is the co-author of the book titled GPT-3: The Ultimate Guide to Building NLP Products with OpenAI API. Today we'll hear a lot about large language models and their rising applications. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Sandra, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Sweet, thanks for having me. Very excited to be here.
Great, great. So let's start with the uh, book itself. So could you talk about your book on GPT-3 and and your experience with expressing the model's potential?
Yeah, I mean, writing a book is a very intense experience. Many people compare it to running a marathon because it's like this intense effort over a long period of time. In this case, it's an intellectual effort, and it's a really one of a kind of experience. I loved being able to write a book and dive deeper into architecture of the model, API design, different types of use cases it tackles very well. We've been doing a lot of interviews with folks that are actively using GPT-3 as part of their product design, whether in enterprises or in startups, and with so many different use cases. So I've learned tons, both like in terms of the sort of limitations, downsides, but also how much value GPT-3 can actually bring to your business. And so I think especially like talking to users of the model was particularly insightful. And yeah, there are also these huge ethical questions, ethical like sociological questions also around the model that are very interesting, and that were a good opportunity, I guess, to explore in the book. So we dived into that as well. Overall, the process left me very hungry for actually seeing more and more GPT-3 implementations in the real world. And I don't know why they're scary. I'm really like impatient in terms of when will my Gmail actually start writing emails for me and stuff like that. I'm just like waiting for that moment to happen. Yeah, and so it's been a blast, and it's been a huge learning experience.
Right. So how long it took actually the whole process?
A little bit over a year, yeah, and it's
Okay.
actually ongoing because here I am talking
Right.
to you about the book, and so part of it is promotion, but also sort of the outcomes of it. So it's still like it still continues even after you have
Right.
written it and published it. It's still going on. Yeah.
Great. Great. So according to you, why LLMs are considered to be having a better natural language understanding?
Okay, so there's a couple factors here. Um, First of all, the secret sauce is the architecture called transformers. which was published in 2016, sorry, 17 by Google Brain researchers. Actually, one of the folks that published the paper "Attention is All You Need" with transformer architecture is CEO of Cohere, where I'm working at, Aidan. So transformer was a really big breakthrough in terms of the type of language model architecture that can thrive at, I think, at the time, primarily translation-based tasks. But then with different types of experiments, combining transformers with huge data sets and huge amount of compute to be able to train models, it turned out that models based off of this architecture can show a very interesting capabilities with every iteration of GPT models. So there was before GPT-3 and before ChatGPT, there was GPT-1 and GPT-2. So every time this model got bigger, every time the number of parameters, number of layers got bigger, and every time the model showed sort of more general capabilities of tackling wide variety of language-based tasks rather than specialize in only one narrow task as it was the case up to the point of LLMs with language models. So I would say that these are important elements of it. Another thing is that GPT is a model that's pre-trained on a large data set, and because it's pre-trained on this like large data set that has a variety of different sources, it's pretty flexible and it's really sort of able to adapt to your use case. It was trained on most of the internet that we have today and other sources as well, books and stuff. But thanks to that, it's just very easy for the model to grasp and emulate certain communication patterns that you might need for your particular case. So that's another thing that you can take this like more general model and then very easily adapt it with fine tuning or with a bunch of examples to your particular fintech or marketing or like whatever use case you may have. So that's GPT. There's also architecture called BERT, and here the big sort of change came with the introduction of embeddings. Embeddings is this very powerful mechanism for numeric text representation that the model performs that allows it to encompass a lot of the context, a lot of the meaning, the semantics behind a given sentence. And having these numeric representations of particular sentences that sort of encapsulate so much meaning, you're then able to manipulate with it and sort of compare it against each other and against other types of text and have very interesting insights that were just not possible before because we were not able to capture so much meaning in the form of numbers before. Yeah, I think that sums it up for me.
Great, great. So, so this is something which came to my mind actually. So, do you believe that large language models are being withheld by a few key large AI service providers?
I think there is. It's a valid question. I think there's a lot of sort of anxiety about keeping the models behind the closed doors. In my experience, I think what happens right now on the market is like the contrary sort of trend. First of all, it's not true that large language models are only provided by folks that keep it private, keep the IP private. So we have huge open source community movement, and we have models like Bloom, which was created by open source community and is completely public and available to sort of play with. OPT from Meta, and just a number of alternatives that are open source. So if you want, there's nothing that stops you from using GPT or BERT architecture and creating some sort of variation of it. Having said that, I work with Cohere, which basically our mission is to build an API that allows folks to access large language models without the knowledge of how it works and why it works and how to make it happen so that it works. The only thing you need to understand is how to make the API call and a little bit about the nature of models that are probabilistic in nature, let's say. So actually, the purpose is not to withhold the models, but make it easier for people without the background in machine learning or data science, any sort of AI background, so to say, to be able to use them and to use the highest possible quality of them, not to worry about training, about retraining, about hosting, about maintenance, because these things are super painful, and you need to dedicate a lot of effort in your organization if you want to sort of have the in-house models. And not every organization wants to, worry over it. I personally wouldn't like to worry over it, and I think it's fair to say that it's useful to have this alternative where you don't have to. So yeah, I think what these providers of APIs are trying to do, what we are trying to do at Cohere, is to remove the barrier and not withhold it, but like making it more and more accessible. We want to see the models being used everywhere around the world in any application possible, and anyone with internet connection can basically now access these models with a click of a button. So yeah, I would just like reverse the thinking around it, because in my experience that's what it's about.
Right, right. So in this context itself, like there are a lot of popular large language models, and like which one it's easy to actually work at this point?
Well, I would say that all of them are pretty easy to work with, especially if you're using an API. If you're training your own model, then it really depends on the type of architecture that you're using, and also it all depends on your level of knowledge. It all depends on what is your end goal, what kind of tasks you want this model to solve, etc. But like the easiest is just to use the API and call a generative model, call a embeddings model, and make it do things for you out of the box. And yeah, so depending on your level of knowledge, I would say if you're trying to make things stupid simple and don't want to worry over sort of training and hosting and maintaining your model, API is your way to go.
Right, right. So when it comes to applications or like basically the enterprise level solutions, so in these kind of applications, like there will be like not just one model or not just one variant, there will be a sequence of the models actually. So in this regard, like do you think these LLMs can be used in large applications, and like it definitely can be used, but like what is the feasibility actually, do you anticipate, like is it going to be a major headache to the deployment, or like when it comes, like let's set aside the APIs, so let's treat them as a bundle of models actually. So in that regard, like what is your take?
So again, the answer is always it depends. It depends on your use case, on what you're trying to achieve, on what kind of already existing setup you have. What I have seen in larger scale projects is that it's usually a mix of sort of in-house models and using an external API to be able to tap into like specific capabilities of LLMs. And certainly they're performing really well at that scale. one example of a customer that Cohere is working with is Hyperwrite. So this is a platform for creating copy of all kinds, like an email copy or marketing copy or like whatever copy you need, whatever writing headache or challenge is ahead of you, Hyperwrite is helping you to automate it. Um, and these are like daily. There's like a massive scale of hitting the API from Hyperwrite customers, and it works very well. So they definitely can perform on that scale. There's no issue with that.
Okay, okay. So, do you think with these latest innovations in LLMs, the artificial general intelligence are close in achieving?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on how you define AGI, because if AGI for you is equals human level intelligence, then I think we are getting closer and closer to it. And large language models are a significant but not exhaustive step towards it. And I think few years down the road, it's going to be our reality that we will have models that are as capable at solving like a general variety of tasks as humans, which is a pretty exciting vision. Um, but what you can mean by AGI is also this sort of super level intelligence, like AI that is smarter than humans, potentially overtakes humans, gets out of the box and starts ruling the world. Um, and here in this case, I think no one knows if it's ever going to happen or when it's going to happen. If so, uh, I myself don't even try to, make any sort of predictions around it. But I think that generally the scientific community, the community of people that are building AI, is divided on that one.
Great. So, over to the applications aspect of these LLMs. So, like where it will impact the most, and could you talk some of the interesting use cases which you have actually witnessed?
Right. So LLMs are language models. So they really thrive at any language specific task. So imagine any sort of task that you are performing on a daily basis, whether it's writing something, talking to someone, maybe scanning through the text, looking for information by reading, searching for stuff. There's so many things that we do on a daily basis that involve language, that large language models will be able to assist us with tremendously and sort of augment the way we are currently process language and text in particular. I think, yeah, as I mentioned, search systems for sure will be augmented very soon with large language models. Storytelling, the way we build a story, the way we create a character. With language model, you basically have a creative assistant that can help you brainstorm ideas for your story, for your character, for your setting, create different iterations of it. I can imagine in the future also stories that are sort of personalized to a user, where you're able to choose how your story unfolds depending on who you are as a reader of the story and what interests you the most. I think there's a lot of documentation and generally like processing of text in organizations that will be augmented for sure. Chatbots, ChatGPT is a great example that you will be able, I think, on a wider scale soon be having just like a very nice small talk human level conversation with your chatbot in order to fix something, because this is already possible. Um, yeah. Also, I guess that's actually something that I'm using on a daily basis. So this autocomplete sort of function where you're trying to write an email or respond to somebody or like just like read an email, and then respond to it. but you don't necessarily have time for it, and you want just like the gist, and also you want somebody to like somebody or something create a draft, create a skeleton for you, so you can just maybe adapt it a little bit and send it. This is like such a productivity hack to have something like this helping you throughout your day. um, Battling through emails, particular emails are something that I'm struggling with recently. So yeah, that's my favorite example. But honestly, the list is long and it's certainly not exhaustive. We are just at the beginning of this large language model revolution, and I think we will just be seeing more and more innovation with it. So currently, maybe these are the most impactful areas, but I think we will discover more and more with years to come.
Right, right, true. So, over to the other aspects actually. So, like training these kind of models is extremely complex and time consuming often. Like, so do you believe it is always worthwhile to train these kind of models in every single use case?
Um, I think, I guess it's like we're coming back to the question whether it makes sense for me to like train my own model since the process is so complicated. It is true, by the way. It's like it's complex, it's painful, it fails so many times, and you need to start over for reasons that you don't understand. It's such a difficult task to do, and working at Cohere, I'm close to this process of like trying to create the best models, the state of the art models, and it's such a challenging task. And so I guess you need to ask yourself whether you have capability to do that, whether it makes sense for your use case, whether your use case and your sort of resources justify doing that, or whether you want to outsource it and have somebody like tap into somebody else's foundational model and then adapt it to your particular use case. Both are good options. It really depends on what you're dealing with. For example, right now I can imagine that when you're a medical facility, some sort of or medtech startup dealing with sensitive personal data, you might just need to use a hosted model, uh, just because of the data protection, right? And just because of the responsibility for your customers. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. Sometimes I think having your own models is justified, at least now, looking at what the technology is at right now. But I think in many cases it just can be outsourced and should be, to avoid headache of having to deal with that, and just focus on perfecting your product and talking to your customers and just like trying to make the best product possible.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree to that point actually. So, another aspect which I would like to discuss. So, people fear AI advancements, and what is your message to them?
Yes, I think it's very natural that people fear. I think it's also something that happens in in general progress, technological progress. Every time there is a big change coming, because it creates this really big uncertainty around it. Mm, my approach was always to sort of embrace it and dive into it to try to understand it as much as possible rather than fear. And that actually, diving into the source of what makes you scared actually sort of frees you from that fear, because you realize that it's not so easy to create super intelligent monster that will take over the world, or b, not so easy to do so many tasks that humans are currently performing. And so it's not that easy to automate everything and get rid of humans altogether and leave them jobless. And also I think it's always a dance between sort of technology and humans. And even if AI starts to automating the more mundane tasks, in my case, let's say it's writing emails, like I hate sort of spending big chunk of my day going through the email communication and having to answer emails and stuff like that. So AI will certainly be, is already taking more and more of these tasks and helping us automate it and get rid of the sort of burden, and then frees us to do more high level creative strategic thinking around it. And I think that's the sort of that's how it's going to be. But like leaving that a little bit behind, I think, yeah, just like if you fear it, make sure to learn as much as possible about it, because you will be surprised how your sort of take will change while you're learning more about it, and how many challenges there are, in just developing these very smart AI systems. It doesn't mean that there is no sort of reason for concern. Certainly there is, and there are big questions that research labs are tackling, and I know, like one great example is AI bias, right? When LLMs were released, when GPT was released, it turned out that it started spitting out a lot of toxic content, and then it turned out it was because there was a lot of toxic content in the data set that was trained on. So a lot of like Reddit pages, a lot of subreddit, different forums, and I don't know if you're familiar with Reddit, but there's a lot of sort of very specific troll-like communication there. And so the model learned it and then was even amplifying it in amplify these types of sort of toxic patterns and biases in the communication. And but this you're sort of able to see once you train it and then release it and let humans actually play with it. And then once you see something is off, you need to act immediately in order to limit the possible harm done. And so there is some reason for concern, but again, it's an ongoing conversation, and companies that are dealing with these powerful models are really sort of up to date in terms of the type of harm, the potential damage that they can do, and they are trying to do everything they can to prevent it.
Right, right. So in this particular context, actually, like I just want to ask, so companies are sometimes afraid to adapt to full AI. So what is your take on that?
Yeah. So again, each organization is different. I've said it like five times maybe already. But that's very true. Like each business is different. Each requires a different process, um, and I don't. I see nothing wrong with the fact that some organizations take longer to adapt to technology, and just because of their nature, just because of the just like we mentioned, the medical applications. I mean, you need to be like super certain that there's absolutely no harm being done with your system to be able to use this new technology. And while it's still in its sort of birth, while we're still discovering the potential downsides and stuff, it takes some time. So these organizations that are withholding from adapting, I think what they're doing is that they're observing the more sort of pioneering folks, startups, the brave enterprises that are tackling the LLMs, and seeing what happens. And I think, but I think it will be inevitable that at some stage they will need to start to understand a little bit how to use this technology in their organization, because other organizations will be using it, and you will want to stay sort of on the cutting edge. So yeah, I think you've got to do what you do for what's best for your organization, and think about also the business value that you can get out of it, because AI can deliver this business value to you. You just need to understand how to utilize it to its best advantage.
Right, right. So these AI models are definitely evolving around time. So what exactly are your thoughts on this?
Yes. So I think it's such an interesting process to observe. Just like I mentioned, there were a handful of iterations of GPT before it became GPT-3 and before it became ChatGPT. And there was a lot of hit and miss as well in that process. It was a messy, messy process, which is a fun thing to observe. So I think we are constantly in this process, of the progress of LLMs, and there will be lots of experiments with the architecture, with the new types of data, with the size of the models, not necessarily going bigger, but maybe smaller, but then more robust and more effective, using less compute. Also, a lot of human feedback is being incorporated and reinforced in the next iterations of these models. So you can really tell the difference between interaction with ChatGPT and GPT-3, right? Because you don't really need any prompts. You don't need to even know what the prompt is. You can just have a small talk conversation with ChatGPT in order to get what you want out of it. And it's a zero shot thing. It's not, you don't give it a handful of examples. It will just be able to perform on the go. And this is thanks to the fact that, with the usage of GPT-3, OpenAI got more and more data from human feedback from users using it, um, and were a and was able to sort of make the model more in touch with how humans communicate, what they need, what they expect, and so now it's able to the models are able to really perform beautifully with a single sentence natural language instruction. So I think they're just going to get better and better, and it's very exciting to observe this trend.
Right, right. This is something which came to my mind on how we are essentially consuming these kind of language models. So there are so many large language models which are being created nowadays, and at one point we have creators, and at one point we have consumers, and consumers are actually kind of converting these created models into different API services and different usable services, but the underlying algorithms remains unchanged actually at every single point. So it's the same algorithm which is being actually translated into different services. So, and they are actually selling it in varied price range or as a varied product itself. So what are your thoughts on this usage and all?
Yeah, I mean, this is the dream come true for the companies that are developing these foundational models for others to use, and also I think this is a testament to how flexible these models are, that you are able to take this general model developed by Cohere or OpenAI or another organization, and then you know throw in a bunch of examples and build a nice UI around it, package it in a nice UI, and then ship it to the world, and have a very unique sort of use case for it. That's a lot of how these marketing content platforms, for example, that are using generative models work. And Yeah, I think it's phenomenal that they're doing it and that they're using it to build new businesses, because that's how we are able to make use of it and provide business value, provide practical value for people for using these models. Models are being developed for others to use them, so it's a really good trend, and I hope there will be more and more organizations that will think of basing their offering off of LLMs coming from another organization.
Right, right. So, towards ethics and responsible side of all these language models. So, like when GPT-3 was released, there have been a lot of questions regarding the uh, ethical consideration or like the bias which is being shown. And over the period of time, we could see that there are some efforts or like significant efforts made to actually course correct these kind of issues by like maybe by actually introducing some more human involvement to kind of speculate, okay, this is kind of like bias or like, and most importantly, like there have been some good efforts like from Alan AI in like they have a model called Ask Delphi, so which clearly speculates, okay, this is more like a biased content or something like that. But in ChatGPT also, like we could see, like I'm not saying it's completely removed, but like there are some good efforts which is being carried out. So like, do you believe like it is really, what to say, it's really taken into consideration while training these kind of large language models?
Yes, yes, I know it for a fact because I work at an organization who does take it super seriously. It's a very important topic for all the sort of leading APIs, Cohere, OpenAI, AI 21 Labs, and others. Actually, those three, a couple of months back, released a shared statement and sort of guidelines, shared guidelines. Three companies with like, different business models, etc. They came together and they were like, okay, so this is this new industry and new technology, and it's very important for the newcomers, new upcoming APIs and models and services that will follow, to sort of go like to really take the responsibility for these models seriously, and to take the ethical concerns seriously, and make sure that your data set is as clean as possible in terms of the bias, in terms of toxicity, that there is a good representation in that data set, that you block the use of your API for any sort of harmful, misguided purposes. So, I don't know, spreading misinformation or promoting hateful speech or whatever it is. Language is such a powerful tool in itself that we are using as humans. And so if you have a language model, you have this, again, another tool on top of it that augments many of these things that we're already able to do with language. And there are so many like bad things you can do with language as well. And as I mentioned, the organizations that are providing LLMs are taking it very seriously and are really sort of strict in terms of what kind of world they want to see with the API being created versus what kind of world they do not want to see being created. And yeah, they're very open about it, very very public about it as well. And I'm really happy that there is such a consideration already at the beginning of sort of this technological revolution. So yeah, I think this is one thing that's like super positive. I mean, there are many positive things, but this one thing in particular, in the context of possible implications of this technology, that the companies are very serious about just minimizing the harmful effects of potential harmful effects and uses of it.
Right, right. So yeah, so as my last question actually, so what are your future aspirations in this particular rising field, and how you are actually looking at this, all of this developments which is happening?
So I love to explore different use cases, and I'm really interested in just working on wider market adoption of LLMs. I made this progression, even talking on my YouTube channel, from like looking at cool demos to looking at cool products, and now these products, many of them are raising millions of dollars of financing, and like there's even one unicorn, Jasper, that's based off of large language models. So it's an actual industry, it's an actual business, and not only startups are tapping into it, but more and more mature organizations are playing with it, experimenting with it, and seeing how they can use it. And so my focus is to support this effort to adopt large language models, and to also continue learning about them, because they continue to change. There are, as I mentioned, iterations in terms of the data or architecture being used, in terms of the human feedback as well. So I'm both learning and sort of trying to helping to create this robust industry, and yeah, I would say this is what I'm focusing on right now.
Great, great. So that covered all my questions, and thank you so much, Sandra, for sharing your experiences and working in this awesome field, actually, particularly in this large language models and shedding light on how things are actually progressing over a period of time. And once again, congratulations on your new book, and I wish you all the best, Sandra.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.